She was crying quietly on the morning bus after losing everything. No job, no direction, just her and the weight of the world. Then, a stranger sat beside her, said nothing, just offered a tissue. He seemed simple, kind, honest. But what she didn't know was that the man sitting next to her controlled more than just a seat on the bus. He held a secret that could change everything. If you're new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe, like the video, and tell us in the comments, where are you watching from today? Now, let's jump into the story. The morning bus rolled through the quiet streets of Harlow City, windshield wipers swiping steady rhythms against the glass. It was Tuesday, a gray, cold kind of day where the clouds looked too tired to move. Route 11, as usual, crawled from the West End through downtown. In one of the back rows sat Nella, her hands tight around the straps of her faded green bag. She leaned against the window, trying to pretend she wasn't crying. Her dark hair was loose, a curtain that hid her red eyes and trembling mouth. The tears had started before she even left the apartment, but she couldn't stop them now. She had tried. She always tried. Just yesterday she had a job. 3 years at Barkley & Sons printing house, editing catalogs, fixing words others didn't care about. It hadn't paid much, but it was stable, and now it was gone. Her boss, who had always smiled and called her dependable, hadn't even looked her in the eye when he said the words. Downsizing. Not personal. But it had felt personal. Everything about it did. She thought of her little sister Mira, still asleep when she left, 16 and trying her best to finish school. Their mother had passed 2 winters ago, and since then, Nella had been the only one holding things together. She paid the rent, bought groceries, tutored on weekends when she could. And now, with one meeting and a few words, everything had fallen apart. The bus stopped at Crenshaw and 6th. People stepped in, coats dripping, faces half asleep. Someone sat beside her. She didn't turn at first, didn't want anyone to see her like this. But then quietly a hand appeared in her line of vision, holding a single tissue. She hesitated. "You looked like you might need one," the man said. His voice was gentle, not pushing, not assuming. Nella took the tissue without speaking. "Thanks," she mumbled. They sat in silence. The bus rumbled on. He didn't ask questions. He didn't offer stories about how things would get better. Instead, he just sat with her. That, in itself, felt strange. People didn't usually do that. After a few minutes, she glanced at him. He wore a brown wool sweater with sleeves a little too long, and jeans that had a patch on one knee. His hair was a soft mess of curls, and he looked a little younger than she was, maybe mid-20s. He was reading a small book, the cover cracked and faded. He didn't look up. "Bad morning?" he asked gently. She nodded. It was all she could manage. "I've had a few of those myself," he said. Then he closed the book, folded it in his hands, and watched the window. The kindness of it, the simplicity, hit her harder than she expected. "I lost my job," she said after a long silence. She didn't know why she said it. Maybe it was just easier to tell a stranger. "I'm sorry," he said, and his voice held no pity, only understanding. 3 years, she said, and it was just over. "That's rough." She nodded again. More people came on the bus, and the man shifted closer to her to make space. The smell of his cologne reached her, clean, quiet, expensive in a way that didn't match his clothes. "I'm Orion," he said after a few more stops. "Nella," she replied. "Nice to meet you, Nella," he said with a small smile. "Wish it were under better circumstances," he chuckled. "Yeah, me too." When her stop came, she stood slowly, her legs still stiff from sitting. "This is me," she said. He nodded. "Take care." She stepped off into the drizzle and turned back once, just for a second. He was still sitting there looking out the window, walking the last 2 blocks to her building. Nella felt different. Not better, not fixed, but seen. Someone had noticed. her sadness, and instead of turning away, they sat with her in it. That meant something. That night, she sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea and her laptop open. Job listings blurred before her tired eyes. Mira came home from school, dropping her bag by the door and kicking off her shoes. "You okay?" her sister asked. "Yeah," Nella lied. "Just a long day." She didn't tell Mira about the job. Not yet. She wasn't ready. Not until she had a plan. As she closed her laptop, her phone buzzed. Unknown number. The message said, "Hope tomorrow's better. I'll be on the same bus if you want company. Orion." Nella stared at the screen. She didn't reply. Not yet. But for the first time that day, she smiled. The next morning, the city felt just as gray as the day before. The sky hung low and the sidewalks were wet from a night of steady rain. Nella stood at the bus stop holding her bag tighter than usual. She hadn't decided if she was hoping Orion would be there or not. The Route 11 bus pulled up. She stepped on and scanned the rows. There he was, near the back again, a book in hand and a space beside him. He looked up and smiled gently. Not too wide, just enough. "Hey," he said as she sat down. "Hey," she replied. They didn't speak for a minute. The hum of the bus and the distant sound of a siren filled the silence between them. But it wasn't uncomfortable. "Feeling any better today?" he asked, his voice calm. "Not really," she said truthfully. "But I got out of bed, so that's something." "It is," he agreed. "That's more than most people manage when everything feels like it's falling apart." She glanced at him. "You say that like you know how that feels." Orion looked down at his hands. "I do." Nella was surprised by the honesty in his voice. She didn't press. Instead, she asked, "What are you reading today?" He held up the book. Short stories, quiet ones. Not much happens, but they still make you feel something. Nella smiled. "Those are the best kind." They spent the rest of the ride talking about books. Orion knew more than she expected. Not just famous titles, but ones most people hadn't heard of. She told him about her favorite author. He told her about a story that made him cry once on the train. When they reached her stop, she hesitated. "Do you like coffee?" Orion asked. She turned to him, surprised. "There's a place just around the corner from here," he added. Not fancy, but quiet. Nella didn't usually say yes to invitations from people she barely knew, but something about Orion felt different. She nodded. "Okay." One coffee. The place he mentioned was a small shop with fogged-up windows and soft music playing in the background. They took a seat by the window. The barista brought 2 mugs, and Orion paid without making a show of it. "So," Nella said, wrapping her hands around the warm cup, "you know what I do. Or did. What about you?" Orion hesitated for just a second. "I'm between things," he said, trying to figure out what's next. "That sounds familiar," she said with a small laugh. He looked at her for a long moment. "You said you were an editor?" "Assistant editor," she corrected. "Mostly reading manuscripts, writing notes, copy editing. Nothing glamorous. Sounds like important work," Orion said. Nella shrugged. "It paid the bills. Do you miss it?" She didn't answer right away. "I do," she said finally. "But I think what I miss more is the feeling of being needed, of being useful." Orion nodded. "I get that." They sipped their coffee. Outside, the street remained quiet, the sky still heavy with clouds. Inside the small cafe, there was a strange sort of peace, like time had slowed down just a little. "You ever thought of tutoring?" Orion asked suddenly. Nella blinked. "Tutoring?" "Yeah," he said. "With your background, you could help students, or people who need help writing essays, resumes, stuff like that. You could even do it online." Nella thought about it. "I guess I never considered it." "You'd be good at it," he said. "You explain things clearly, and you actually listen." She smiled. "You don't even know me." "Maybe," he said, "but I can tell." A few minutes passed before he spoke again. "I'm working on something. he said, looking down at his coffee. A book. Or trying to. Nella raised her eyebrows. A book? Yeah, he said, almost shy. It's not good, but it matters to me. I've been stuck lately. I thought maybe, if you had time, you could look at it. Nella stared at him. You want me to edit your book? Just read a few pages, he said quickly. I'd pay you, of course. She shook her head. You don't need to pay me, not for that. I want to, he said. Your time is worth something. That made her pause. People didn't usually say things like that. Okay, she said softly. I'll take a look. They left the cafe together. Outside, the sky was starting to lighten just a little. Orion handed her a small folder from his bag. It's rough, he warned. Nella took it carefully. I've read worse. That's comforting, he said with a laugh. They reached the corner where their paths split. Same bus tomorrow? Orion asked. Nella nodded. Same seat? As she walked the rest of the way home, the folder under her arm, she felt something she hadn't in days, a small spark. Not hope exactly, but maybe the start of it. Nella stared at the folder on her small kitchen table. She had read Orion's pages twice now. The story was raw, unpolished, but there was something real in it. The main character was a man struggling to live up to someone else's idea of success, always feeling like he didn't belong in the world around him. It felt personal. She had written her notes in the margins, careful but honest. She didn't hold back her opinions, and she didn't sugarcoat the weak parts. She figured if Orion was serious about writing, he'd want the truth. She sent him the pages with her feedback later that night. By morning, he had already replied. Thank you. Everything you wrote was fair. Better than fair. Helpful. Would you be open to meeting again this week? I'd like to talk through some of the suggestions. Nella agreed. They met at the same cafe 2 days later. Orion was already there, a coffee, waiting for her. When she sat down, he smiled in that quiet way she had come to recognize. I read every note, he said. You were right about the pacing and the dialogue in chapter 3. She raised her eyebrows. You're not mad? Not at all, he said. I asked for the truth, and you gave it. They talked for over an hour. About writing. About characters. About the fears that sometimes came when you tried to create something honest. It was the most free Nella had felt in weeks. As they were leaving, Nella noticed a paper sticking out of Orion's folder. She saw a photo, half exposed. It showed Orion dressed in a tuxedo, standing in a room full of glittering lights. He looked completely different, polished, formal. Next to him stood a tall man in a suit, his arm around Orion's shoulders. Orion noticed her glance. He hesitated, then quickly tucked the photo back into the folder. Something cold settled in Nella's stomach. Who was that? She asked quietly. Orion looked down at his shoes. My father. She waited, hoping he'd say more, but he didn't. The next day, Nella couldn't stop thinking about it. Orion was kind, thoughtful, and strange in a gentle way. But she had known from the beginning that something about him didn't add up. The way he spoke, the books he read, the cologne, the expensive kind. Her curiosity finally got the better of her. That evening, she searched his name. Orion Vale. The internet filled with results, photos of Orion standing beside company logos, headlines that read Heir to Vale Publishing Group takes the reins after father's passing, interviews, press events, charity galas. Nella sat back in her chair, heart pounding. He had lied. He wasn't. Just a man between things. He was the new head of one of the largest publishing companies in the city, and he had said nothing. When he messaged her later that night, she didn't reply. She needed time to think. Days passed. She tried to stay busy. Her tutoring efforts had started picking up. Mira, her sister, had been accepted into a scholarship program, but the tuition gap was still there. Rent was due. Food costs were rising. Everything felt heavy again. One afternoon, as she walked home from the coffee shop job she had picked up for extra income, her phone buzzed. It was Mira. "Nella," her sister said, breathless. "You won't believe this." "What?" "I got another scholarship. A full ride. Everything covered. I don't know how. It just appeared in my email. And guess what? It's from something called the Vera Foundation." Nella froze. She had never heard of that foundation, but something about it sounded familiar. She looked it up as soon as she got home. The Vera Foundation's website showed a list of board members, and there it was. Advisor, Leora Glenn, Special Assistant to Orion Vale. Nella felt anger rise in her chest. Was this how Orion made up for lying? Handing out quiet favors behind her back? That night, she asked to meet him. Not at the cafe. Not on the bus. At the park bench near the community library. He arrived just as the sun was dipping low behind the buildings. She was already sitting, arms crossed, folder in her lap. "You found out?" he said softly. "You could have told me," she replied. "You should have." Orion sat beside her, leaving space. "I know," he said. "I was scared." "Of what?" she asked. "That I wouldn't talk to you if I knew you had money." "Yes," he said honestly, "because that happens, and because for once I wanted someone to know me before they knew the name." She looked at him. He wasn't wearing the fancy clothes from the photo, just his usual sweater, his usual quiet eyes. "And the scholarship?" she asked. He shook his head. "I didn't do that. Leora must have heard us talking. She runs part of the foundation." Nella didn't respond. Her thoughts tangled in knots. "I'm sorry," Orion said, "not just for keeping the truth, but for not trusting you enough to share it." Nella sighed. "I don't need someone to fix my life, Orion. I've always taken care of Mira and myself. I don't want to feel like I owe you." "You don't owe me anything," he said. "I didn't want to fix your life, I just wanted to be part of it." They sat in silence. The sky darkened. Nella didn't know what would happen next, but she did know that sometimes the truth hurt. But it also opened doors, and maybe, just maybe, this wasn't the end of their story. The morning after their conversation, at the park, Nella woke before sunrise. Her apartment was quiet, the soft hum of the fridge the only sound. She sat by the window, wrapped in a blanket, watching the city wake up. She kept thinking about Orion, about the way he had looked at her, not with guilt or pity, but with something like hope. He hadn't tried to argue or explain away everything. He had simply listened. And for the first time in a long time, someone had just been present with her pain. Not fixing it, just seeing it. The sky slowly turned from gray to pale blue. Nella checked the time. If she left now, she could still catch the bus. She walked down the street with her hands deep in her pockets, heart heavy but uncertain. She wasn't sure if she wanted to see Orion, but part of her didn't want to miss him either. The Route 11 bus pulled up, same as always. The doors opened with a soft hiss. She stepped on. He wasn't there. She sat in their usual spot anyway. The ride felt longer than usual. Outside, the world moved past in slow motion. Bikes, crosswalks, buses going the other way. Inside the bus, everything felt still. Then, just before the next stop, Orion stepped on. His eyes met hers immediately. "Is this seat taken?" he asked quietly. Nella gave a small shake of her head. "Not yet." He sat down beside her. "No book this time, no bag." "Thank you for being there yesterday," she said after a while. "Thank you for not walking away," he replied. They rode in silence for a few minutes, and then Orion turned slightly toward her. "I want to show you something," he said. "If you're willing." Nella looked at him. "Where?" "My world," he said. "But not the part you saw online, the real part." She hesitated, then nodded. "Okay." They got off a few stops later and walked a few blocks in silence. The streets became wider, cleaner, the buildings taller. She recognized the area from the photos she had seen online. They stopped outside a glass building with high doors and polished floors. "This is my office," Orion said, "or part of it." Inside, people moved around with purpose. They nodded at Orion with respect. No one questioned who Nella was. He took her to a quiet conference room and opened a laptop on the table. On the screen were blueprints, charts, and photos of something under construction. "What's this?" she asked. "A new project," Orion said. "Low-cost housing, a library, community space, and classrooms. Not much profit in it, so the board isn't thrilled, but I believe in it." Nella stared at the images. Small but warm-looking homes, children in open courtyards, bookshelves in every room. "It's beautiful," she said. "I want to do more of this," he said. "Build something that lasts, not just towers for the wealthy." He turned to her, his voice quiet. "You asked me once who I was. This is who I want to be. Not the man on the magazine covers, not the CEO with a name I didn't choose. Just a person who tries to leave things better than he found them." Nella didn't say anything for a while. Her eyes stayed on the screen. "I think that's someone worth knowing," she said. Later that evening, they sat on a bench outside the community library, watching the sunset fade behind the buildings. Orion handed her a small package. "What's this?" she asked. "Open it." Inside was a thin notebook, the cover a deep shade of blue. Her initials were printed on the corner. "Your own writing journal," he said. "You said you always wanted to write." Nella ran her fingers over the smooth cover. "Thank you. And," he added, "there's a small space behind my office we're turning into a reading room. I want you to lead workshops there. Writing, editing, mentoring, whatever you want." Nella blinked. "Me? You," he said. "You're more than qualified. And you're the kind of person this city needs more of." She didn't answer right away. Her throat felt tight. No one had ever offered her a chance like this before, not without asking for something in return. "I'll think about it," she whispered. "That's all I ask." As they stood up to leave, the streetlights flickered on. They walked together, slow and quiet, neither in a rush to say goodbye. At her apartment door, Orion paused. "Can I see you again?" he asked. "Not just on the bus?" Nella smiled. "I think I'd like that." He nodded. "Then I'll be there tomorrow." "Same seat? Always." They said goodnight, and Nella watched him walk down the street, disappearing into the evening light. The next morning she boarded the bus early. Her notebook was in her bag and her heart felt a little lighter. When Orion stepped on minutes later, she was already in their spot, waiting. He sat beside her. Outside, the city moved. But inside, something new had begun, and the seat, it was no longer empty.